This is Hot Summer Nights, and we're in for a show for sure. Spoiler alert, while I might give you my opinion on the film, that's no substitute for watching it for yourself. Links to the film are in the description. We open up following a car driving down a rainy road, while a boy tells us that the news didn't get the story right. He's going to tell us exactly how it happened. Daniel is the speeding car down the road at reckless speeds until he's T-boned by another vehicle. Suddenly, time jumps to before. Daniel's in his room listening to some folk rock music, and his mother's getting ready to go see his father. When she asks if he'd like to go to see him, he simply glares at her and goes back to sitting in his room meditating. As old footage plays of Daniel's father, our narrator tells us of how he was a veteran and everyone liked him, but when he died, Daniel just shut down. Daniel started a fire in his garage when he tried to set the records his father got him on fire. You don't say, that's one way to put it. Time jumps again, but this time it just says, and then. And then. The narrator tells us that the town Daniel moved to was just a simple place like any other, and we see that they're in Cape Cod in June of 1991. We see Daniel as just one of those kids that just didn't fit in as either a tourist or a resident, and something changed in him that summer. We cut to Daniel hanging out at a teen party, and it's not going very well. After trying to socialize, Daniel just makes his way outside, and he spots a red Camaro pulling in. Hunter steps out of the car, and he's literally the complete opposite of Daniel. Hunter is also the local weed supplier. Hunter's that badass that's selling to everyone, doing everyone, and no one wants to admit they know him. That guy you're jealous of, but you're also feeling sorry for him all the time too. As the radio repeats that this is the hottest summer Cape Cod has ever seen, Hunter comes in and makes Daniel an accomplice by making him hide the weed he had on him. Daniel thinks quickly and hides it in the cash register. When the officer tries to pay for his drink, Daniel just lets him have it. Hunter likes Daniel's style, and he asks him if he wants to smoke with him. They end up going to an older party than the last one, and Daniel's living the life right now. Were drugs this accessible in the early 90s? Everyone's doing a line of coke, smoking a joint and crushing pills, not a care in the world. And this party's absolutely packed. There doesn't seem to be a shortage of any substance here. Hunter sets Daniel up with his first hit of weed, and he takes a long rip off the bong. It hits him immediately, and he collapses to the floor in such a relaxed state that Hunter even checks his pulse. The whole time he was inhaling, I kept saying he might want to take a second there. It was a massive rip. Later on, Daniel finds himself at a drive-in theater, and he hears someone fighting in one of the cars near him. When Michaela gets out of the man's car, she spots him sitting by himself and she just hops in his passenger seat. We soon find out that every ex she's ever had has wound up dead. Yeah, and a bunch of them probably chopped off a nut before they got together just to wind up alone, and with only one nut. Again, not worth it, guys. When the guy comes over to her window to try and get her back in his car, Daniel eventually takes off to take her home. As the drive goes on, the two of them seem to connect on an awkward level that seems to work. But when he drops her off, we see that she doesn't want to deal with the abusive father that's waiting inside. After she gets out of the car, he watches her walk down the street. The next morning, Daniel smokes with Hunter on the beach, and he can't stop talking about Michaela. He's upset that he doesn't know her name. But the more he talks about her, the more Hunter looks like he has an idea of who he's talking about. Eventually, Daniel asks Hunter about starting to sell weed, and Hunter calls him out on wanting to do it for impressing the girl. When he asks where she lives, Daniel tells him where he dropped her off the night before, and Hunter tells him that Michaela is his sister. I've got to give him credit for asking Hunter of all people. This awkward dude just happens to be best buds with the coolest drug dealer in town, and he has the balls to ask to date his sister. He's either brave or dumber than a box of rocks. Hunter tells him that he wants her to leave town and live a good life. Daniel goes on to tell him that he's still serious about selling, and it only makes perfect sense. After a little persuasion, he talks him into thinking it's a good idea. Later, Hunter gives him a rundown on the product, and Daniel tries to figure out how to sell people a zip instead of just a dime. If I known that this was about a nerd selling drugs, I probably would have watched this movie when it came out. And it's set in the 90s, it's the perfect movie. After some time, Daniel starts making a name for himself, and he gets pulled over by Sergeant Calhoun. After getting the fear of God put into him, Daniel heads to Hunter to try and come up with a game plan to get bigger, better customers. Hunter goes on to tell him that the problem is with getting a bigger, better supplier, and that's when Daniel takes him to a party where he's supposed to meet a big supplier. Well, that goes about as well as you'd expect having a scrawny dude like Daniel popping up in your house asking for pounds of drugs to go. The dealer's even so confused that he tries to backtrack. Again, I can't tell if Daniel's ballsy or dumb, but it makes for great entertainment. Especially when the dealer pulls a gun on Daniel and Hunter pops out of nowhere and damn near bashes his face with his own gun. Good, clean entertainment. Daniel and Hunter casually walk out of the car and they just leave. Later on, Daniel spots Michaela at the store, and he causes a commotion to get her attention. After she gets a little up close and personal, she ends up leaving him there in the aisle. On his walk home, a brown van pulls over and tells Daniel to get in the van. And when he sees Hunter's already in the back, he has no choice but to follow along. Eventually, they all sit down at a dinner to conduct some business. And we see the split in the team. Hunter tells him that he's perfectly content selling his dime bags to tourists, but Daniel wants more. Now the dealer says that he'll put him through a trial period, where he'll provide him with a good weight of bulk weed, and they have until Thursday to pay him back. Initially, he offers them £2 to sell, and Hunter doesn't think they can. Then, Daniel asks them for £5. That's a crazy amount to push for someone that doesn't already have a buyer. He's been pushing dime bags over a week, and now he's put them in bed with some serious people to push £5 in 2 days? I don't see this going well, but I've been wrong before. Sure enough, Daniel gets the help of his cousin Taylor, and they push the £5 in a single night. When the dealer shows up to get his money from Hunter and Daniel, he congratulates them on doing a phenomenal job. Soon, Daniel and Hunter have people in all the surrounding counties, and they're pushing £15 a week. By July, the three of them are a hit, and they're making bank. One night, Daniel finds Michaela hanging out at the local fair, and he comes up to take a shot. Oh yeah, I mean, he's gonna have to deal with Hunter, of course, but still. On the other side of town, Hunter's caught staring at a beautiful woman at a restaurant named Amy, and he goes over to take his shot too. In no time at all, he hooks her in. Later on, Hunter and Daniel go to the drive-in theater to watch Terminator, and he ends up running into Michaela and her friends at the concession stand. After her friends let him have it, he heads to the bathroom and she comes in to kiss him aggressively for a bit. This could potentially be one of the most romantic, toxic relationships I've seen in a while. And it really does suit the story really well. It's literally the perfect fix for the situation of him growing out of the lonely, awkward kid. The next day, Hunter and Daniel sit down to talk about how Hunter loves Amy and Daniel, and he hints to Daniel that he knows about him and Michaela. At first, Daniel gets nervous, but Hunter laughs about it in the end, and Daniel goes to see her that night. When Daniel goes to see her, he tells her that he can get more for her, and she begins to question if he's involved in any shady stuff. He promises that he isn't, but when she talks about her brother, he understands where she's coming from. She tells him that her mom had been really sick a while back, but Hunter was too caught up in selling drugs that he got kicked out of their school. Their mom asked him to stop, but he couldn't get out of the business. Michaela refuses to talk to him, and she refuses to use any of the money he leaves her. By August, everyone is doing well, and they've sold a record amount of weed. One night, Hunter drops off Amy at her parents' house, and we see that her father is none other than Sergeant Calhoun. Finding that out is a convenient way to end the summer. She even rushes up to the wall to climb into her room, and somehow she changes into a robe and hair towel in a matter of seconds. It's actually really amazing how she's able to pull off a costume change that quickly. As Michaela and Daniel enjoy each other's company in a field, a massive storm sweeps over them, and they take shelter in the car. Of course, they get in the car in the perfect position for, you know what, and that's just the perfect excuse to say, hey, let's do it. So naturally, they get it on in a rainy field. Later that night, the two of them head to the local arcade, and the biggest drama bomb goes off. Hunter and Sam go to the same arcade and run into Daniel as Michaela's off getting tokens. When she comes back, she and Hunter have an awkward conversation with Daniel caught right in the middle of it. He tries to play it off as though he wasn't there with Michaela, but there was really no possible way both sides of the coin could have landed face up here. As news of the hurricane comes in, Hunter rushes to drop off Sam, and she runs into her father sitting on the porch waiting for her. He asks her why Hunter of all the boys in town. Okay, so maybe all the guys in town should hope the storm comes before the next guy gets them instead. Hunter's set to kill Daniel, and Sergeant Calhoun is pulling up to Hunter's gas station as we speak. Once he shows up at the station Hunter's working at, he tries to get Hunter outside so he can take him for a ride. And he ends up going to a parking lot to talk about how he sees this ending. Calhoun actually tries to talk to him like a human being. It's kinda refreshing, actually. He tries to talk to him about how he sees this all ending, and Hunter straight up tells him a picket fence and meatloaf dinner aren't in the cards for him. Maybe you shouldn't say that to your girlfriend's father. The longer they sit in the parking lot, they end up seeing Hunter's father walking out of the bar, and Calhoun tells him how they used to be best friends back in the day. Calhoun tries to make him understand that his choices aren't always about himself, but sometimes it's to make someone else's life better. The next day, Daniel tells Hunter about a cocaine hookup that he wants to meet with. But Hunter tries to tell him that this won't be good for business with their current dealer. He tries to talk some sense into him, but Daniel just won't listen. That night, Hunter stops by Michaela's house to drop off money for her, but he catches her saying goodbye to someone. He ends up apologizing about their mother, and he tells her that he's trying to do better. I love how she puts it out there. Just one thing she wants, and she's not taking anything other than okay for an answer. He eventually turns around and tells her he'll stop, so everyone gets what they want. As news of the storm comes in over the radio, Daniel meets with Hunter at the garage, and Hunter asks Daniel for the truth about whether he's been seeing his sister. On the other side of town, Michaela's father finds the bag of money she's been stashing from Hunter, and she takes it and runs. Michaela drives to the garage where she finds the two men together, and she realizes that she's been lied to. She drops the money on the ground and drives off. Daniel hops in his car and follows after her. Next, we see Daniel meeting with Shep, who's his new connection to the Coke world. He tries to conduct business and head out, but Shep makes him hit a line before he leaves. Daniel soon finds out that the line he took is actually only baby formula, and Shep puts it all out there in the open. He knows who Daniel works for, and he's going to take his money because he thinks he's just stupid. He warns him to run far away, and that's that. Daniel leaves and heads to the phone. He gets a call from his dealer, and when he answers, he finds out that his dealer is coming for him. At the same time, the hurricane of the century is about to make landfall over their sleepy town. Hunter tries to call Michaela, but she ignores all of his calls. Daniel has flashes of all the memories and connections he's made over the summer, and he pulls into the station looking for Hunter. Hunter answers the door with a gun pointed at Daniel, and he gives Daniel the count of 3 to run away. As Daniel speeds through town, Hunter stays behind to try and deal with the dealer, and he's killed in the process. And we've come full circle. Obviously, this makes a lot more sense now, but I really thought it was going to be the dealer that hit him, not some random car in a storm. Meanwhile, you've got Michaela sitting at home thinking about her brother. She's going to be in for a surprise when the storm's gone. I literally take that comment back. She runs all the way to the garage and finds her brother's body in the middle of the garage. It's almost like this ended up not being Daniel's story. He's over at her empty bedroom looking for her, and she's here to witness the aftermath of a redeeming moment for the secretly key character. The narrator tells us about the aftermath of the hurricane, and we see Hunter's funeral. There was even a rumor that Sergeant Calhoun paid for it. Daniel ended up just leaving without another word, and that was his way of showing that he loved Michaela. Michaela, on the other hand, it turns out Michaela hopped on a bus right after the storm blew through, and she was never heard from again either. Who knows? Maybe the two of them ended up finding each other again. It was clear that there was nothing left for her in that sleepy town. Like I said before, if I had known a little more about what this movie was really about, I would have watched it a long time ago. I'm glad I took the time now, and I would recommend it to anyone that likes those dark slice-of-life movies. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.